Finance Committee agenda. I have apologies from Lee, who's had to leave. It's not clear to me whether it's temporarily or for the rest of the afternoon, so we'll take it as that he's an apology until such time as he may be able to come back. I'm not sure. I'll move the confirmation of the agenda. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Wilson, those in favour? Against? Carried. Reminders with regard to declarations of interest, and we move to the financial result for the 11 months. Report from the Financial Controller, Marie Clark. Thank you, Marie. Do you have anything you want to add to the report at this stage, or do we just move straight to questions?
Well, first off, there's a correction that I need to draw your attention to on page 4.18. Under Business Information Services, we're talking about a variance of millions, 243 million favourable. That would be nice, but unfortunately it's thousands.
Nothing else to add?
No, at this stage we'll just, so basically it's a business as usual type report, just continuation of business as usual. The results excluding the Waipori Fund, a favourable variance of 5.8 million, and if you include Waipori, 7.758 million. So the favourable result has been driven by favourable variances in interest, depreciation and some operating costs, offset by some unfavourable revenue of about 1.947 million, and that's outlined in the report, the reasons for that. The capital budget is 66% spent, so to date the favourable variance is 16.116 million, and this carried forwards at this stage approved to 15.338 million.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Councillor White.
Thank you, Marie. On page 4-17, it's great to see that the council departments have really made some savings here. Do you believe that there's still further savings to be had, or is the staff really ground down pretty well?
What part are we talking about?
When we look at, there was also savings across a number of council departments for telecommunication costs, printing, copying, stationery costs, travel costs and sundry costs.
Okay. You would like to think that we will still make some savings, but typically at the end of the year there's a big tidy up on accruals, so the challenge is always to be making savings.
Well, I applaud the staff of inside DCC for bringing these savings.
Councillor McKellar.
Yeah, thank you. Just noting the comments around debt, net debt level on page 413 of the documents. You speak to the fact that our short-term borrowings are now 6.85 million, and that as a result we're likely to be raising some additional term debt. What is your best estimate then for what we might be sitting at the end of this year, and will that, this financial year, like the financial year that we're coming to an end of, and that will be reported on next month, yes, and will that be in line with our targets in terms of getting back down to that 200 mil by 2021?
I might pass that over to the Group CFO to answer that one.
Thanks, I think. Basically, we're in line to have a debt at the end of this year as like less than it was last year. Less than what we were last year. That's because I haven't said it, Mike. 2021, I can't comment at this time. We really need to go through the whole process to actually forward. And some of that will depend on other reports as well. So
my recollection of the projections was that we would be at a slightly reduced level of net term debt by the end of this year as we were at the beginning of the year. And so I take it that we're on target for that.
yes.
Thank you.
if you have a look on page 4.7, under non-current liabilities, and bearing in mind that's not an end-of-year position, we're showing term loans of about 218 million versus an end-of-year budget of about 257 million, and we will have been borrowing in June, which will have roughly about 10 million. So on that basis, we would be looking at a figure lower than what we had projected at the beginning of the year.
So it's likely to be good news, and I'm just trying to preempt it. I have another really, it's just detailed question, but
I think it's not bad news, but the problem with these things is it's also affected by deferred capital expenditure, how much you had in the bank at the beginning of the year versus how much. But just bear that in mind. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering if either the staff could tell me, is there any quantification of the cost of processing OIAs, internal and external, or where does it live? Is it general administration or is it civic?
It's not something that sits in
It's not
finance.
separated.
No, it's not, but Sandy might give us a handle on that. If not, we'll be able to follow that up for you.
That's fine. I'd just like some information about the general cost, the time cost of the processing time.
Well, I can tell you it's costly in terms of time,
Yeah.
but in terms of dollars, yeah,
Which has
see what
a
we
clear
can find
dollar
out.
cost. That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking
we
for.
possibly don't identify that, but I'll check.
Could I ask for some information about that next meeting round, please?
We currently don't record it out separately. The problem you have is the cost will be right across the whole organisation because there's such a wide variety of people who can answer the questions. I know at Auckland Council they did an exercise and theirs are at $750 each.
Well, it's just that it's the cost I'm concerned about, so I'm hesitant to trigger the generation of more time because I'm concerned about time, but I would like some more information if you could put something together.
So currently, Sandy, do I...
provide that we don't collect information on the time it takes to process things. So at the moment we simply couldn't provide that information. I can provide you with the number of requests and the topics that have been up under that we don't collect the information on the time.
I wonder if we should, so that we can qualify what it costs. I'll wait for an answer on that question. Thank you.
Councillor Tavish?
I've just got two additional
Yep.
questions, which are, the first is in relation to resource consents. Notes it was down on budget in this period. I'm hearing on the grapevine that we've had rather a lot come in the last period, so we're likely, I imagine, to recoup some of that lost ground. Is that right? Revenue.
The analyst who deals with it's not here, so I can't check with her, but my understanding is there was a big rush on the 30th. So yes, I anticipate that will be answered, but I can just check that for you.
And in terms of projecting forward, can you refresh my memory as to whether or not, or perhaps could you refresh my memory by email, if you can't answer it now, as to whether or not we have revised down our income projections in that particular budget line for next year, given that this is it's a trend, and whilst we might have a rush in the last period of this year, driven in part by the introduction of DCs, it's likely that we won't be seeing that flow through into next year.
Yeah. Again, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I will check.
And the other question which I have, which is more of a property issue really, but I think it is relevant to flag it here. We have empty civic space, which has now been empty for a good 12 months. And I'm just wondering whether we have done any strategic thinking about, whilst that particular space is empty, what else we could be using it for, or other ways in which we might be able to use it to generate a return of sorts for our community. And yeah, whether or not any of that thinking has been done by property, or I appreciate we've got a new manager who's only just in place, but I'd like to see some thinking around that.
I had heard that there were some plans, but that was unofficial, so again, I'll double check.
Councillor Wiley?
Thank you, Chair. Agree on 4-12, accounts receivable owing at May 2014 was 6.4 million, of which 69.5% was owed for 2 months and over, 4.451 million. Can you, how are we going about collecting those? And
We have a very rigorous process at collecting them. The ones that are there are very few overdue, and the ones that are usually a higher dollar value, and they mostly relate to property transactions. And so we have a monthly review of the debt. We keep a very tight control over it.
any particular reason why we've gone from, say, 42.5% last year to 69.5% this year?
Ms. Carisbrook.
And for clarification, that's an arranged debt.
Yes. And we're earning interest on it as well.
We are.
Thank you. Just on that same page, forgive me if I missed something you've already said, but the graph above, number of rates, rebate applications granted. I'm trying to figure out what that is as a percentage of number of rates, rebate applications. Or are all of the applications granted?
No, not all of them are granted. They have to meet the criteria set out by the Department of Internal Affairs, and it's mostly around income levels and also the entity owning sort of arrangement, so it's got to meet strict criteria. We probably do grant most of the ones. I have got the details back in the office as to how many have applied that haven't been granted. I could let you know that.
And is it that information kept year on year?
Yes, it
The
is.
applications are?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of questions I have. On page 4.4, we're showing a slight overspend on personnel costs, but I note that in the last month of last year we had a disproportionately high figure, which I assume is driven by end-of-year adjustments, and I'm just wondering, should we have any concerns with regard to that this year as well?
The draft accounts for June are indicating that that budget stays unfavourable. Obviously, dump state adjustments do have an impact, particularly around annual leave and other accruals.
So we'll see. And the Waipori net position, that surplus, how that is taking us closer to that point that we're supposed to be at in terms of our policy. Does it? I'm assuming that if we're generating a surplus greater than the budget, that would be being retained by Waipori and would take us closer to the point we were supposed to be.
Yes, but the problem we've got is that, yes, we are getting closer. The issue that we do have is that it is still behind overall if you look back over history. So,
It's a moving target.
Yeah, it's a moving target, but it's better to be a moving target. There's $2 million better off than it was before. And the other question I have is on page 4.6, and I did signal this to Marie in advance, but it was just, it sticks out like those things on dogs. But the annual budget opening cash position was projected to be 20 million, and it was actually only 1 million, and it's a fairly meaningful distinction. So I'm just wondering if you can clarify how we could have a projected opening position of close to $29 million cash balance, but actually open with $1 million cash balance.
Okay. So the issue is that the opening balance included intention to draw down some loans, which we didn't draw down in either 2012 and 13, and we haven't drawn down as much as intended in 2013-14. Some of that's driven by the fact that we're behind on our capital spend, and so we've got a reduced need for working capital.
So it's in essence, it comes down to the fact that that figure's set quite a long way in advance, and we didn't need to borrow the amounts that we had projected to borrow at the time it was set.
That's right.
Okay. And the last question, well, it's not a question, but it's just a suggestion. On page 4.9, we list that interest rate protection, and one of the things that I think is obvious when we look at that is that the percentage of debt that's not covered is quite small as a percentage now, which means our flexibility to move is proportionately small. And I just wonder if it would be useful to have as a regular thing on this table just the various years that debt comes off protection, because it would be, I think, helpful. No other questions? Somebody like to move the adoption of the report? Thank you. A second, please. Thank you, Councillor Stone. Is there any discussion? Being none, I'll put it. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move to tab 5. Which is here for information and I guess feedback, right?
Yes. Yep. So I guess the key thing what we're trying to do here is try and make the information as understandable as possible. I know some might think that's a black art when it comes to accountancy, but apparently it's not. So what we're trying to do is highlight the key numbers across the organisation. So the finance team have come up with 6. And I'm wanting to answer any questions or assist as much as possible.
Councillor Wayne?
In the year-to-date operating cash flow, I figured there was supposed to be a black line in there.
Correct. The issue that we have currently is that we don't do a budget on a monthly basis for cash flow, but we are for the next financial year. So you'll see that number there next year.
I just want to say thank you, because I think if my fellow Nicholas for some time today was here, he would be very pleased to see this in this format. He's been asking for it for a long time. It's in graph and easily translatable, so congratulations, thank you.
Can I just draw attention to one in particular? I regularly read comments around the indebted nature of this council and the fact that its doomsday clock is set at about 1 minute to midnight. So I would just draw people's attention to the graph at the bottom in the middle, which demonstrates what we own in comparison to what we owe, and there would be very few public companies that would be able to demonstrate a graph of that kind. Now, I totally accept that the issue around debt for us is around the affordability of that debt for our ratepayers, and I'm totally on board with that as a concern, but I do think at times I read the most astounding reports about our slow descent into bankruptcy, and I do think that some of the people who make those kinds of comments might well do with having a look at this graph as well. Councillor McTavish.
Well, I just wonder whether, in terms of clarity around this graph, in terms of things like, well, I guess the question that would come to spring to mind for a lot of constituents is what is an asset? And I wonder whether it would be helpful to have that, if these are going to be going onto the website, as I anticipate the intention is, to have that perhaps just drilled down into a little bit so that people understand whether or not we're treating, for example, our ownership of companies as assets as part of that mix, or whether this is relating to physical assets, etc.
Do you want me to answer that?
Just a general comment in terms of, for the purposes of constituent clarity.
So we'll add a little note to the graph explaining what an asset is.
Well,
Councillor Wilson.
that raises two questions. One is, does this include companies?
So these graphs are for the DCC only.
Okay, yeah. And the next question is that one of the nastiest motions that we have to put every year is the one where we basically claim a certain percentage of people, the ratepayers, we've got a demand that we can make to secure our debt on. And in that motion itself, and the rights as a to levy rates, gives us an asset. But none of those are factored in here.
No.
These are not, they're not demands. They're assets.
These are buildings, infrastructure, investments, cash on hand,
Assets.
property, plant, and equipment.
Well, demand is an asset, constantly.
Just further to Jitty's point, I guess I just wonder whether it would be useful to have a dollar value put on that, because percentages can be misleading depending on what the total pool is that you're dividing up.
So the total assets, if you go back to the financial reports,
I just mean on this particular slide or graph.
yeah, 3.1.
Yeah.
I'll just,
Councillor Wilson.
there was nothing else for me.
I don't think so.
Look, I just would urge a wee bit of caution because Lee's not here. I'll try to back for him, and that is that a lot of these assets will include underground infrastructure, which is of no saleable value. It is expensive to replace it, it needs replacing. There's a lot of reasons why that graph could make your bills make, but in reality, I think we still want to be very, very mindful of that. And so I realise that you weren't suggesting we don't have any problems, but I think just we can be careful of that too.
No, I thought I was at pains to clarify that the issue primarily is around affordability of debt, but that we're not about to descend into bankruptcy was my point.
Could I add, I think the key thing here is you need to read those two graphs together, the one on the left, on the bottom, and the one in the middle, because that's saying your total assets, how it's funded, and then the trend.
Yeah, I just guess I think about if we're going to descend into bankruptcy, a lot of those assets will be completely unsaleable. Yeah.
We could live in the pipes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one last question. In the year-to-date capital expenditure, I'm intrigued by the budget line and how it can dip.
Right, so the reason it dips is because of carry forwards. So basically we said that we're going to spend this amount here. Once we do the carry forward review I'll get the timing wrong, but I'm sure Carolyn will correct me, April, May. That then drops it down. That's when we say that's what our new capital expenditure is expected to be for the year.
Okay, thank you.
So once again, we're trying to, for the 2014-15 year, we'll have that on a monthly basis, so we should judge how we're doing better.
All right, well, favourable feedback, thank you, and it's really useful. I'll move the noting of the report. Have a second, please. Thank you, Councillor Staines. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Move to the insurance renewal. Grant, do you want to speak to this?
I guess so. I guess the key thing here is that we've achieved the objectives that were set out at the start of the renewal period. It's been a real team effort between ourselves, the key people in the finance across the organisation, and Cranberry Lockwood. And I personally think we've actually got quite a good result. But there's still room for us to improve. I am concerned about our first loss limit, or maximum foreseeable loss, and we're going to do some work on that this year to make sure it's at the appropriate level.
Questions? Councillor Mensman.
Well, in respect of this issue, it's clearly not just an issue for this city, and the consequences of the Christchurch earthquake and the subsequent 7 earthquakes have been felt in Wellington as well, in terms of the extraordinary behaviour of the insurance industry. What, if any, initiatives are being undertaken by organisations like Local Government New Zealand around the issue nationwide? I can't imagine anyone else is doing anything about it, but the government certainly isn't. But it's clearly an issue like the one that was highlighted by our colleague in respect of sea-level rise responsibilities and to those OGT. This is a huge issue for communities the whole length of the country. What's happening there?
So Local Government New Zealand has set up a working party to look at this issue and around whether there are other options available to councils. They've met 2 times, 3 shortly. For my sins, I'm on that working party. So, so there is work being done. There has been a report written by Craig Stobo who has indicated a number of options that could be considered, and they've been considered, and a report will go back to the LGNZ executive to see whether they want to pursue that further. So, and central government, Treasury is feeding into that process. Central government is particularly concerned about their 40, 60 or 60% share of infrastructure costs, and whether they can look at capping that.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the asterisks next to our fine art premium and what that denotes.
Paintings.
I will have to refer to the original report.
No hurry, but I just couldn't find the
No.
corresponding asterisk.
Something to do with the transit.
You don't
Clauses like that.
It probably says exclude sea lions.
It's an internal note for us to actually refer. There's an issue with the level of colour for that particular policy. So,
What is that concern?
there are artworks that we do not actually evaluations for, which is common for a art gallery.
Thanks.
All right, if there are no further questions, I'll move the noting of the report. Second, please. Thank you. Those in favour? I didn't give anybody a chance to discuss it. Apologies. And I'll be, oh sorry, are there any notification of any items for the chair? No, thank you.